Another load, another mile. That's the mantra, isn't it? This one was a simple run, the kind you could do in your sleep. I was hauling a load of car parts from Cleveland to St. Louis. Nothing special, nothing fragile, just solid, honest weight in the trailer behind me. The weather was clear, a cool autumn night with a sky so black the stars looked like pinpricks in velvet. I had my thermos full of black coffee, the CB radio crackling with the occasional half-asleep chatter of other drivers, and the steady thrum of the diesel engine as my only companion. I'd been on I-70 for hours, the white lines hypnotizing me, the green signs counting down the miles to Indianapolis. Then Terre Haute. My body was on autopilot, my mind 1,000 miles away, thinking about nothing and everything all at once. The bills, the mortgage, the sound of my own bed. You spend so much time in this rolling metal box that your home starts to feel like a dream, and the cab becomes your reality. The seat's worn leather was molded to my shape, the dashboard lights were a familiar constellation. I was making good time. The traffic had thinned out to almost nothing after Indianapolis. It was just me, the night, and the long, dark ribbon of asphalt stretching out into the heartland. I had the cruise control set, my window cracked just enough to let in a sliver of cold, fresh air to keep me sharp. This was the good part of the job, the solitude, the sense of moving through a sleeping world. I took a long pull from my thermos, the bitter coffee a welcome jolt. My plan was to skirt around the southern edge of Illinois, hook onto I-64 for a stretch, then pick up I-57 north. It's a route I've taken a dozen times before. It avoids the chaos of Chicago and has some decent truck stops with showers that don't make your skin crawl. I was looking forward to a hot shower and a hot meal at the Flying J in Effingham. That was the goalpost I'd set in my mind. Everything was normal. Perfectly, blessedly normal. The tires hummed their steady song on the pavement. The suspension handled the gentle rises and falls of the road with a soft, rhythmic bounce. I flicked through the radio stations, finding nothing but static, preaching, and pop country I'd heard 100 times before. I settled on the static, a white noise to fill the space. I saw the sign for the exit approaching, its green glow a beacon in the dark. This was where I was supposed to leave the smooth, wide lanes of the interstate and get onto the state highway that would connect me to my route. I signaled, checked my mirrors out of pure habit, and guided the rig onto the off-ramp. The road curved, and then I was on State Route 37. It was narrower, darker, the line paint a little more faded, but it was still a good road. I settled in for this leg of the journey, another 50 miles or so of relative quiet before I'd hit the next major interchange. The trees crowded in closer here, their skeletal branches reaching over the road like bony fingers. The moon was high, casting long, dancing shadows as I sped past. I took another sip of coffee. It was going to be an easy night. I should have known better than to think that. On the road, easy never lasts. It started so subtly that I almost dismissed it. A faint, high-frequency shudder through the steering wheel. It felt like driving over those rumble strips they put on the shoulder to wake you up, but I was dead center in my lane. I tightened my grip, my knuckles turning white for a second. Tire pressure, I muttered to myself. A low tire, maybe on the trailer, could cause a vibration. I'd have to pull over at the next wide spot and do a visual check, but the shudder didn't feel mechanical. It didn't have the heavy, thumping rhythm of a flat or the wobble of a bad alignment. This was different. It was a fine, constant buzz, like the road itself was vibrating. I glanced at my dashboard, but all the gauges were in the green. Oil pressure, water temp, RPMs, everything was normal. The engine purred without a complaint. It was just me and this strange, unsettling tremor. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the road ahead. The vibration traveled up through the seat, a constant, teeth-jarring hum that was just on the edge of unbearable. It was the kind of sensation that gets under your skin, literally. I could feel it in my molars. I turned off the radio, the silence in the cab making the vibration seem louder, more pronounced. It was a sound now, a low, grinding moan from the undercarriage. Then, I saw the sign, old and weathered, almost swallowed by ivy. Now entering St. Florian's Parish. The name meant nothing to me. I'd never heard of it. I'd run this route before and never noticed this sign. But then, you don't notice everything, especially not on a dark, tree-lined road in the middle of the night. The vibration seemed to intensify for a moment as I passed the sign, or was that my imagination? I leaned forward, peering through the windshield, trying to see the road surface. My headlights cut a swath through the darkness, illuminating the black asphalt. It looked perfect, smooth, recently paved, without a single crack or pothole. It was in better condition than the interstate I'd just left. So why was my rig shaking like I was driving over a washboard gravel road? A cold knot of dread began to form in my stomach. Logic fought with instinct. Logic said it was a mechanical issue, something with the drive shaft or the trailer axles. But instinct, that primal part of the brain that kept our ancestors alive, was screaming that this was wrong. This was deeply, fundamentally wrong. The vibration wasn't coming from the truck. It was coming from the road. The road was pushing back. I slowed down, dropping from 55 to 40. The vibration lessened slightly, but it didn't disappear. It was still there, a persistent, grating presence. I thought about pulling over right there, but the shoulders were narrow, and the trees felt like they were closing in. I didn't want to stop. I didn't want my tires to be still on this surface. I had to keep moving. A memory, half formed and hazy, surfaced in my mind. Something I'd heard years ago, in a truck stop diner over greasy eggs. An old-timer, his face a roadmap of wrinkles, muttering about a road in Illinois. A road built over a cemetery. We'd all laughed it off. Another piece of trucker superstition, like the phantom hitchhiker or the black dog. I'd laughed the loudest. I wasn't laughing now. The vibration was a constant now, a part of the truck's very being. It was the frantic beating of a terrified heart. My own heart was keeping pace with it, thumping hard against my ribs. I was gripping the wheel so hard my arms were starting to ache. The coffee in my stomach had turned to acid. I needed to focus on something else, anything else. I started to look for landmarks, anything to gauge how much longer this stretch of road was. The trees were an unbroken wall of darkness on either side. No houses, no side roads, no mailboxes. It was as if this road existed in a vacuum, a pocket of reality that had been sewn shut from the rest of the world. The only light came from my own rig, pushing back against an oppressive blackness that felt hungry. And then I saw it. A flicker of white in the periphery of my headlights. Just a flash, gone as soon as I noticed it. I leaned forward, my nose almost touching the cold windshield. There it was again. Not a reflection, but something on the road itself. As my high beams hit it, the shape resolved. It was a pattern in the asphalt, a lighter colored stone or aggregate that was set into the blacktop. It looked like lettering. I slowed down even more, crawling along at 25 miles per hour. The vibration was still there, a grinding complaint. My headlights illuminated another patch of the strange, embedded stone. It was another set of letters, followed by numbers. ELIZABTH, I read aloud, my voice a dry croak in the silent cab. 184 to 1899. My blood ran cold. It was a name. And dates. A birth and a death. It wasn't a pattern. It was an inscription. I was driving over a gravestone. The old-timer's story crashed back into my mind with the force of a physical blow. The legend was true. They had paved over the cemetery. They had used the headstones themselves in the foundation of the road. My tires weren't vibrating on asphalt. They were vibrating on the carved, final memories of the dead. I was desecrating 1,000 graves with every revolution of my 18 wheels. A wave of nausea hit me. I felt like a vandal, a grave robber. But it was more than that. It was a profound, soul-deep violation. The vibration wasn't just a physical phenomenon anymore. It was a protest. It was the anger of the disturbed, the outrage of the forgotten, rising up through the layers of tar and stone to shake the very machines that trespassed upon them. I saw another one. Jonas Miller. Then another. Beloved wife and mother, they flashed under my wheels, one after another, a dizzying, macabre scroll of the dead. The vibrations seemed to change as I passed over each one, the shudder taking on a different character, a sharper jolt, a deeper groan, as if each soul had its own unique voice of discontent. I couldn't stop. I couldn't look away. I was a prisoner in my own cab, forced to read the obituaries of the road. The names and dates became a blur, a torrent of stolen identities. The air in the cab grew thick and cold. My breath started to plume in front of my face, though the heater was still blowing warm air. The dread was no longer a knot in my stomach. It was a cloak, heavy and suffocating, wrapped tightly around me. The cold was the next thing. It came on so fast. 1 minute I was fine, the next I was shivering, my teeth chattering. I cranked the heater, turning the dial all the way to red. Hot, dry air blasted from the vents, but it did nothing. The cold wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from inside the cab, a deep, penetrating chill that seemed to originate from the very floor of the truck, from the pedals my feet were resting on. I looked down, and I wished to God I hadn't, for the briefest second. A flicker of a moment, I saw not the worn rubber of the brake pedal, but a pale, gaunt hand, its fingers curled as if in sleep. I jerked my foot back with a gasp, my heart hammering against my sternum. I blinked, and it was just the pedal again. A trick of the light, my mind screaming from the pressure. It had to be. The CB radio, which had been silent for miles, suddenly erupted with a burst of static. I jumped, the sound unnaturally loud in the tense silence. I reached to turn it down, but my hand froze. Beneath the static, I could hear voices, not the clear, drawling tones of other truckers, but faint, whispering voices layered on top of each other. A chorus of the faint and the forgotten. I couldn't make out words. Just a sibilant rush of sound, like wind through dead leaves. It was the sound of a crowd murmuring in a vast, empty hall. I strained to listen, my body rigid. A single, clear word cut through the noise, spoken by the dry, rasping voice of an old man. Mine. Then a child's voice, trembling and lost. Mother. A woman, sobbing. Why can't I sleep? The voices weren't coming from the speaker. They were coming from the static itself, woven into the fabric of the noise. They were all around me, filling the cab. The cold intensified, and I could feel a presence in the passenger seat. I didn't dare look. I kept my eyes locked on the road, on the endless parade of names flashing beneath me. The vibration in the steering wheel changed. It was no longer a uniform shudder. It developed a pattern. A long shake, a short jitter, another long shake. It was rhythmic. It was deliberate. My mind, reeling with terror, recognized it. It was a cadence, a pulse. It was the same rhythm as a human heartbeat, amplified through tons of steel and rubber. Loop-dub, loop-dub. Lub-dub. They were reminding me they were here. They had hearts that once beat, lives that were once lived. And I was driving over their chests. A sudden, violent impact shook the entire truck. Thump. Thump. It came from the underside of the trailer. It felt like I'd run over to large, solid objects. I slammed on the brakes, the air brakes hissing in protest. The rig shuddered to a halt, the names on the road frozen in my headlights just ahead of the hood. I sat there, panting, my entire body trembling. I hadn't hit anything. There was nothing on the road to hit, but the sensation had been sickeningly real. It felt like I'd driven over to bodies. I couldn't stay stopped. The silence that fell after I braked was worse than the noise. It was a listening silence. I put the truck back in gear, my hand shaking so badly I could barely work the stick. The rig lurched forward, and the vibrations and the heartbeat rhythm started up again immediately, as if annoyed by the brief pause. I had to get off this road. I scanned the darkness desperately, looking for any turn-off, any dirt track, any sign of life. There was nothing. Just the unending wall of trees and the road paved with the dead. My GPS on my phone had frozen miles back, the screen a mess of pixelated nonsense. I was alone. Truly alone. I chanced to glance in my side mirror, just to check my trailer. The lights were all functioning, the red glow illuminating the empty road behind me. But then I looked closer. The road in my mirror wasn't empty. The names and dates weren't just embedded in the asphalt. They were standing upright. In the reflection, I saw a field of weathered, tilting headstones stretching out into the gloom, a ghostly cemetery restored to its original state, and standing among them were figures. Pale, translucent shapes, their forms shifting in and out of focus. A man in a long coat, a woman in a tattered dress, a small child holding the skirt of a woman who wasn't there. They were all facing the road, facing me. Their faces were indistinct, but I could feel their gaze, a pressure against the back of my skull, cold and accusing. I wrenched my eyes away from the mirror, a strangled cry escaping my lips. I focused straight ahead, my vision blurring with tears of terror. "I'm sorry," I whispered, the words torn from me. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't mean to." The cold in the cab deepened. The whispering from the CB grew louder, more agitated. The word, "sorry," echoed back at me from a dozen different voices, twisted with skepticism and anger. Sorry wasn't enough. Sorry wouldn't give them back their rest. The vibrations intensified, the truck beginning to shimmy violently. Warning lights flickered on my dashboard. The check engine light, the tire pressure monitor. The truck was being shaken to pieces. I was losing control. The steering wheel bucked in my hands, trying to wrench itself from my grip. I was fighting the road itself, and the road was winning. Ahead, I saw a break in the trees. A yellow, diamond-shaped sign. It was a crossroads. A way out. Hope, frail and desperate, surged in my chest. I just had to make it another half mile. I pressed the accelerator, the engine roaring in protest. The truck surged forward, the vibrations becoming a continuous, teeth-rattling earthquake. The voices in the static screamed. The figures in my mirror began to drift closer to the road. The crossroads were my only hope, a simple, rural intersection with a stop sign. It represented a return to the normal world, a world where roads were made of gravel and asphalt, not memories and bones. I didn't care which way I turned, left or right, as long as it got me off this cursed stretch of pavement. I was 100 yards away. Then 50. The truck was shaking so violently I was afraid the trailer would come unhitched. The windshield wipers, knocked loose, started flapping madly on their own. The air in the cab was now freezing, my breath coming in ragged, visible gasps. The presence in the passenger seat was so palpable I could feel the cold radiating from it. I didn't dare look. 20 yards. I was slowing down, my foot hovering over the brake, ready to stomp on it the moment I was clear of the names. 10 yards. I could see the rough, gravel-covered shoulder of the crossroad. It looked like heaven. And then the engine died. It didn't sputter. It didn't cough. It was just silenced, as if a giant hand had reached into the engine bay and snuffed it out. The dashboard went black. The headlights flickered and died, plunging me into absolute darkness. The only sound was the frantic, final hiss of the air brakes as the truck rolled to a dead stop. I was stranded, right in the middle of the intersection. On top of the names. The silence was absolute. The vibrations were gone. The whispers were gone. The heartbeat was gone. It was a void, a deafening, oppressive silence that was somehow worse than all the noise that had come before. They had my full attention now. I sat there in the dark, too terrified to move, to breathe. The cold was so intense it felt like needles in my skin. I slowly turned my head to look out the passenger window. A face was pressed against the glass. It was gaunt and pale, the skin stretched tight over the skull. Its eyes were deep, empty sockets, but it wasn't looking at me. It was looking through me. Its mouth was open in a silent scream, and etched on its forehead, as if carved into its very flesh, was a name. The same name I had seen on the road minutes before. Elizabeth. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying for it to be over. When I opened them, the face was gone. I looked out the driver's side window. Another face. A man with a thick, old-timey mustache, his headstone named Jonas visible on his tattered shirt. Then another, and another. They surrounded the truck, a silent, staring committee of the dead. They weren't aggressive. They were just present. They were showing me what I had done. They were making me see them. I fumbled for the door handle, an insane thought of escape flashing through my mind. But where would I go? Out there, with them. My fingers brushed the cold metal, and a jolt, like a static shock but freezing cold, shot up my arm. I pulled my hand back with a yelp. There was no escape. I was their guest, and they were waiting for me to understand. I don't know how long I sat there. Time had lost all meaning. It could have been minutes. It could have been hours. I was paralyzed by a fear so pure it had burned away everything else: thought, hope, even the urge to scream. I was just a vessel for terror, waiting to be shattered. And then, a thought cut through the static of my panic. It wasn't my thought. It was a feeling, imparted to me by the 100 silent faces outside my window. It wasn't anger. It wasn't a desire for revenge. It was grief. A profound, bottomless sorrow at being forgotten, at being paved over, at having their final rest shattered by the endless, grinding passage of commerce and indifference. They weren't trying to kill me. They were trying to make me remember. My voice was a broken thing when I finally found it. I didn't speak to anyone in particular. I spoke to the night, to the cold, to the faces in the dark. I see you, I whispered. I see you, Elizabeth. I see you, Jonas. I see you, all of you. Your names, your dates. I won't forget. I'm sorry you were forgotten. I'm sorry they did this to you. I spoke the names I remembered from the road. I apologized for the noise, for the wait, for the violation. I didn't ask for my life. I just acknowledged theirs. As I spoke, the cold began to recede. It didn't vanish, but it softened from a biting freeze to the natural chill of an autumn night. The oppressive pressure in the cab lifted. I risked a glance out the window. The faces were gone. The crossroads were just a crossroads again, dark and empty. Tentatively, I reached for the ignition key. My hand still shook, but I turned it. The starter motor groaned, once, twice, and then the diesel engine rumbled to life. The dashboard lights flickered on, bright and normal. The headlights pierced the darkness, illuminating the ordinary, black asphalt of the crossroad ahead. I didn't hesitate. I put the truck in gear, pulled across the intersection, and onto the gravel shoulder of the new road. I stopped again, just to feel the solid, honest crunch of gravel under my tires. I sat there for a long time, letting the normal sounds of the engine and the night wash over me, my forehead resting on the cool, steady steering wheel. I never finished that run. I called my dispatcher from the next town over, my voice still unsteady. I told him I had a mechanical failure, that I was too shaken to drive. I took a hotel room and slept for 14 hours straight. I still drive. It's the only thing I know how to do. But I never take that route anymore. I'll add 100 miles to my trip to avoid it. And sometimes, on a quiet, too still night, when my tires hum on a particularly smooth patch of asphalt, I feel a ghost of that vibration. And I whisper the names I can still remember into the darkness of my cab. It's the least I can do. I'm the only one who knows they're there.